Welcome to another weekly Forex forecast. There were quite some good opportunities in the market last week. I took two trades, one break even and one small winner. We will have a look at these two trades when we get to these pairs. The pairs are still on watch also this week. We do start now on the DXY on the weekly time frame, and we can see we had not too much progression, but that's what we were actually expecting. I'm going straight down to the 4-hour time frame. We were discussing actually this structure here, this potential continuation structure last week, but we said price needs a bit more volume to build more volume in this area for the next move, and price did tap into this very small liquidity area. That's actually the start of this small descending channel here into this bigger structure, and it started to sell off a little bit towards the end of the week. So also on the daily time frame we can see we have some bearish pressure again towards the end of the week. Overall, like when we just look at the proportions, and we are still looking for price to fill this low here, does this look like it's enough volume for the next bigger move to the downside? Yes and no. I would not be surprised if price remains a bit longer in this area and maybe build some bigger structure here, because if we move this rain line here to this low, the previous low, and then use the Fibonacci tool, we can also see that this low here aligns perfectly with the 50% retrace of this last bigger impulsive move to the downside. So I would not be surprised for price to remain in this area and then maybe come back up one more time and building something like that, a bigger expanding structure before we see the next bigger move to the downside. But that can take another like 2 to 3 weeks, so we will remain we expect price to remain a bit in this area, but nevertheless these are quite big moves, so we can benefit from some short-term moves. And for next week I'm leaning more for the DXY to continue to sell at least into the lows here and potentially slightly lower. Going to Euro US dollar, and we can see of course a similar picture here. We start here on the daily, no, we start on the weekly just to have a look. It should look more or less the same. Yeah, we get a little bit bullish pressure after these two high test candles. The last one was a bearish high test candle, and then we get a bullish low test candle into a very small liquidity area here to the left, which was actually the start of this last ascending structure here into the liquidity area here to the left. We said that's a very significant area here because it's visible even on the daily time frame, and we can see it actually did recheck this area here finally. We did not really get a proper washout, but we can see we get some bullish pressure towards the end of the week. And looking on the 4-hour time frame, we can also see we have some we broke out of this descending channel here. We had a very nice descending channel even when we use this low here. That aligns fairly well, and we now break out of this area here. And looking at the DXY positioning, so I'm actually expecting for price to continue to the upside, and I'm looking here more for a bullish continuation pattern. And looking here on the 1-hour time frame, we have a small potential base here, so I would like to see price forming a clear 1, 2, 3 bullish bull flag continuation pattern, something like that, and then I would entertain along in this area. Of course, there is an argument for a dropout of a running channel. We are just sitting here also on this last previous high here, so we have to be a bit careful. And we also know that price tends to go back into the start of a wedge pattern or descending channel, so we have some areas to look out. But if we get a clear 3-touch continuation structure, that would be very deliberate price action, and that would definitely warrant a trade to the upside. New Zealand dollar, US dollar is a bit a hedge play. Looking on the weekly time frame, we can see here we have the second bearish week actually after this very bearish high test into a liquidity area here to the left, and we also still have this small gap to the previous higher time frame low. So I'm leaning here more to the short side, and going down to the 4-hour time frame, we can see we are in a range right now. So we had some structures here, but we failed to go up and down. So we had, see it clearer here on the 1-hour time frame. We have still this area here, also this low for a potential retest. And early in the week, it looks a bit that we went into this direction. We had a structure here. We failed to make a new low. We came back up one more time. This is kind of a V-shaped recovery, sold off again, failed to break through again. And now we're just like slowly losing momentum here and have a bit more pressure to the downside. So right now, I'm not interested to take any trades within this range here. So I'm looking actually for price to drop out and then forming some form of bearish continuation, preferably even retesting the range here, and then I would entertain a short trade in this area. So that's kind of a hedge against the other dollar related pairs. Also here, pound US dollar on the weekly time frame, we can see here we have also a bit of conflicting conflicting price action. We had this high test before, now a bullish, not quite a doji, so it's a bit undecided price action, but we are still, we have this gap here to the low, so it could go both ways, like we said with the DXY. So the DXY positioning is quite important at the moment, so we keep an eye on that. And going down to the 4-hour time frame, we can also see that the structure is starting to become a bit large. We discussed that before. We don't really have to go back into this area here because we retested that already, and we were initially looking for that as a base for a continuation. However, price formed a bigger, more complex structure, and then here this one looks a bit more like a turnaround right now. But it's very wicky, and we turned around somewhere in no man's land. So that's why for me it looks a bit like that this is still a bigger structure in the making. And if I get a proper second top and then price coming back down for a proper section 1, 2 and a 3 into this previous low, then I would definitely entertain a long here. Keep in mind the structure is already a bit large for just a 4-hour risk entry. So in this case, we might better look for a lower time frame, like we get a 4-hour rejection in this area and then a lower time frame continuation pattern to then enter a long trade in this area. US dollar yen, even though we had 3 bullish weeks in a row, the last one was a bullish high test candle with a strong wick, so that could also be an indication for a potential turnaround. However, it wicked towards an area of interest. So, and what we also know, very often these areas get filled. It's kind of a weak fill before we see the next move. And going down to the 4-hour time frame, we can clearly see there is a gap. We left a small gap to this area of interest here, this liquidity point, which is quite significant because it is visible on the higher time frame. And therefore, I would not be surprised if price is going back up one more time, tapping into this area and then turning around, and then we get some form of an expanding reversal structure in this area, and that would give us a very nice entry here for a short continuation and the next bigger move to the downside. However, you can see here the upward channel, the ascending channel is very well respected so far, and we have here some form of significant lows. So if we see early next week an impulsive break out of this channel, then followed by a bearish continuation, then of course that would definitely warrant the trade to the downside for a short, because that could then also mean that we get in the bigger picture price coming back down in this area and then forming maybe a much bigger structure here before we then get the next leg. But this alone would then warrant a short-term trade. Euro Australian dollar, I took a trade here. We had that on watch before. We were still looking for a long continuation, and we had here on the 4-hour time frame, that's what we discussed, quite a big structure, a bullish structure, a 1 2 and then a 3 here, and I took a trade here. Yes, this one. Okay. After this 4-hour, this washout and then the retrace, it's a bit a higher risk trade because we still have here a gap to the low. This is a bit a more significant liquidity area, and you can see it's a bit a squeeze in the overall flag. Then price broke up to the upside, and then I mismanaged that again a bit, but I did not want to take too much risk then, because after price committed, we can see we get this V-shaped recovery here, and then we had a clear reaction in this area, and price started to aggressively sell off. And considering this, considering the gap here to this area here, it would also make sense for price to drop further down. So that's why I moved my stop loss to a 1-to-1 for 1%, and I get tagged out, and then price on Friday started to go higher again. However, we can see here overall now we have quite an impulsive move here on the 4-hour time frame. We can see I just get tagged out on this impulsive 4-hour bearish candle, and this looked very, very bearish at the time. It's an engulfing candle and engulfing like 2 previous very bullish candles coming from an area of interest, so that could easily just be a continuation and then drop further. So, but however, we retraced it with the last 3 candles of the week, and we are now we continue the bullish momentum which we started in this area here with this candle. So I'm looking now for a bullish continuation, going down to the 1-hour time frame or even the 15 minutes to see a bit a clearer structure. We have this low here, which aligns with this retest here. So that means price does not necessarily have to go back down to this area. So I use this as a potential first base. And if we then see price starting to form a bull flag continuation next week, then I would definitely entertain a long in this area. That would also be a structure which would be clearly visible on the 1 hour. That would definitely be a 1 hour entry. And if price doing the same structure here, a bullish structure tapping into this area here, even better, then it's also okay. It just has to be a very clear structured bull flag pattern before I entertain another long. Euro pound. On the weekly time frame, it's a bit a tricky one. We still have this gap here to the low. We discussed it also a few weeks. Euro pound is on and off of the watch list over and over again. We also had this gap. It's not very clean price action. It's still a bearish week, but with a very long wick, a low test candle going down to the 4-hour time frame. We can see we have some form of structure. This overall is a bit too steep. However, we can see we got some bullish momentum, and on the 1-hour time frame we can see we tapped into a small liquidity area here. This was quite a sharp liquidity area here to the left, and we really reacted from here. And we can also see we had this this descending channel here towards the end with the 1, 2, 3, and then had a small gap here on the 3rd and washed out, and now are on the run for the upside. So again, the positioning is not ideal because we are just on the same height, like on the level again here. And you can see we had that here as well. We had a very impulsive run and bullish momentum. Then price started to hover a bit here and then still dropped. However, the difference is here, this came from nowhere, and here the base here is coming from a small liquidity area. So that gives this one slightly more weight. However, it's still a certain risk here because of the positioning, but I'm looking for a long continuation. And similar to the pair before, I'm going to the 15 minutes for a potential base. I take this as a base. We have a small gap here, and if we start forming a nice continuation pattern in this area here, so forget about the last week, that's Friday evening week. So if we get something like that clearly visible on the 1-hour time frame, then I would entertain a long in this area. New Zealand dollar Canadian, On the weekly time frame, we have a follow through week. We had a very nice high test candle, a washout into this liquidity area here, and we discussed that also before. New Zealand dollar CAD is respecting structure fairly well. We still have a gap here to the low. We have a V-shape recovery on the higher time frame, and we reacted to this V-shape and have now a follow through week. So we are looking for a short continuation. On the 4-hour time frame, we can see it's not the cleanest price action. Even on the clearer on the 1-hour time frame, we had some structure. We had initially we were looking during the week for something like that, a continuation pattern here. That's also potential 1, 2, 3, but then we failed to sell off. So that means this was not enough volume to trigger the next leg to the downside. So price went up into this very good visible liquidity area here and then sold off. However, failed again to break out of the structure, then came back up again in form of a small continuation, and now forming another smaller continuation, and everything is still within this range here. So similar to New Zealand dollar, US dollar, we are in a range, so we are waiting for price to break out the range, followed by a bearish continuation, preferably retesting this area, and then we would enter a short for the next leg to the downside. Australian dollar yen on the weekly time frame, that's my other trade from last week. We were looking for the short. We discussed that after this bearish high test candle into an area of interest to the left on the daily time frame, actually going straight to the 4-hour time frame. And then we were here. This was a Monday morning for me, and that was exactly the trade we were forecasting. The price started somewhere in this area, and we were looking for the structure to be completed for a 1, 2, 3, which it then actually did. It finished the structure with the 1, 2, 3, slightly impulsive last leg, but overall it was a 1, 2, 3 finishing the structure, gave me a nice entry with the retrace candle just on the third touch. So I entered here, then price moved to a 1.3%. I moved to break even and get tagged out a little bit later. And yeah, price then started to form something more complex or grabbing more volume higher up. And we can see here we tapped into a higher up area of interest, again in form of a 1, 2, 3. Here we can see that. Then we broke, we had some reaction but did not form a new high, and then started to get some bearish momentum, a retrace, and now again another bearish move to the downside. So overall, right now with this price action, I'm leaning more towards the bearish side and looking for a bearish continuation. On the 15-minute time frame, we can see we do have quite a nice liquidity area here, and if we get a 1, 2, 3 into this liquidity area, that would be clearly visible on the 1-hour time frame, would be within proportion and a nice entry for a short continuation. New Zealand dollar yen is similar. On the weekly time frame, we can see here we have here also very erratic price action. We have now 2 high test candles, so that means the second one did not really reach the top, but it's still kind of a weak fill, went into the similar area and then respected the area and is now still looking for, actually we are looking for price to fill this gap here to this low, filling this week here on the higher time frame. Going down to the 4-hour time frame, we can see here also we had an ascending channel, then price broke out here on the 1-hour time frame. We actually had some reaction on this liquidity area here. This one we can see here with a very nice reversal, a tweezer top here, and then we had quite an impulsive move, a small retrace, and now we are definitely outside this channel, and I'm now looking for price to finish at least the next leg into this area, potentially then all the way down. And we are now looking for a bigger structured flag here on the 15-minute time frame. We can see very similar picture to Australian dollar yen before. We have here a small liquidity area, and we are looking for price to form something like that, which would then be clearly visible on the 1-hour time frame and enter enter a short in this area. And then we have another wild card here. Copper, actually, on the weekly time frame. Look at this positioning. We had here the high and we had a complete washout on the weekly time frame. The wick is more than 50% outside the previous high, and we are really positioned here prime for a short. We also left a small gap here after this strong retrace, a V-shape recovery here on the weekly, and before we then went up and washing out the previous high here. So overall, on the lower time frame, we are looking for price now to form preferably a second continuation. You can see here we are not that well positioned for this structure here, and this is already slightly getting slightly large. So I would prefer for price to break below this area here and then forming a bigger second continuation. So and that would be perfect for an entry in this area. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye bye.